basics for repair and lending organizations, and I'm going to go first. There's intro before my slides. You go then. Go ahead, Leanna.
It's okay.
I didn't know.
It's all good. Yeah, we are going to talk about three different approaches that the three of us are centered in. So Susie's going to talk about practical solutions for very small budgets, how to make the most of limited funds. I'm going to talk about the resources that are out there for fundraising and just a couple of best practices as a professional fundraiser. And Emily's going to talk about government contracting, which tends to be kind of the largest sources of funding you can find. All right, so Susie's going to kick us off.
Yeah, and I apologize. My experience is all in Repair Cafe, and while there is a lot of overlap with tool libraries, it's a very different. Obviously, it's a very different setup because we are always temporary or itinerant. We don't have permanent locations. So the number one thing when you're doing a Repair Cafe, and I've heard other people have issues or come up with different suggestions, but find a free venue if you can. It may differ in your part of the country. For instance, I know Don Fick, who runs North Carolina Repair Cafe group, said that is just not a thing. They cannot get locations for free down there. But up here in New York, we're north of the city and in a lot of rural areas, we haven't had a problem with that. In fact, usually people want you to be at their space because they think it benefits them or they love just hosting this. And so that hasn't been an issue. So that is one thing that you can do. Oh, actually, if you could go back, I'm sorry. Just to highlight real fast, some of the locations: senior centers, churches or other houses of worship, community centers, firehouses actually is a really nice one. In nice weather, you can open the bays and have that. Maker spaces, if that's a good workaround for you guys, and libraries are some of our most common spaces. Okay, thank you. So when you're looking for a venue other than free, there are certain things that make it better or appropriate, and some that make it not usable. One of the things that and there are workarounds for these, but it makes your life so much easier if the venue has tables and chairs on site that you can use. And additionally, a lot of spaces have people who will volunteer. And this is another issue. Sometimes if they have to pay someone to set up for you, then that becomes not a free venue. But sometimes volunteers at the place, either your own or theirs, will set up the tables and chairs for you and then break them down. So that's another issue about the tables and chairs, because you need your setup to be right for you. You need parking. We're up here in the country largely, and it's nice to. I put this under the bonus list. It's nice to also be close to public transportation for those who would use that. But most people where I am are going to be driving, especially the fixers, as well as people with big items. So that's kind of crucial to have parking. Good lighting. I'm a jewelry fixer myself, and I do try to bring a little lamp, but it is just, if it's too dark, it's just impossible to see the detail work. And I know the textile, everyone feels this way. So windows or just lighting that is decent. Having enough electrical outlets, and don't forget that textile, so, the sewing people also need electrical outlets. It's not just about electrical fixers. It has to be handicapped accessible, not just for our guests, but for the fixers who have wagons. So, it really is. We've had a bunch that are, but you have to wait in line and use the key and the more accessible it is for everyone, the better it really will be. And bathrooms. We got offered a space once that was interesting, but there was no bathroom there, and that is absolutely a no-go. You cannot ask people to volunteer for 4 hours and not produce a bathroom. And the other additional bonuses are that it be walkable if it's a town where people live, and if there's a kitchenette or separate space, so that the fixers can take a break, the volunteers can take a break to eat their lunch, because sometimes the only time you get to eat is if you step away from your station. So, okay, next. This is just a sample budget breakdown. This is the budget that I've sort of created for my group when a new cafe says I want to start, and it's about 620, and that is a lot, but it doesn't have to be. That's what I call the worst case scenario budget, or I live north of the city of New York. I call it the Westchester budget. I just want people to be aware that things cost money in certain towns more than others, and you need to be prepared. So I've highlighted the three largest things, and we'll talk about on the next slide how we can mitigate those bigger costs, because those are really large, but we can. So the other thing is, for the tape and glue, which isn't a lot. Ask the volunteers or the fixers if they can bring their own for the first cafe, and then get reimbursed to buy more if that becomes an issue. So if you start out with nothing as your volunteer person running a cafe, that's one way to do it. If you have to print flyers or posters, ask if your town will print them. Sometimes here in New York, there's a lot of climate smart communities, which are they're very eager to get points for doing things like these cafes. Or if there's a green team or the town just wants to put this on their roster as something good they did, they might go ahead and print those for you and pay for that. Um, Additional things, sometimes they will also print the guest paperwork, the town, but another way to mitigate that, if it's multiple pages, is you could put the house rules in a sheet or blow it up and have one copy and then don't put it on every single person's sheet. So it's there and they could see it, but they don't have to have it printed over and over again. There is a fee to join the International Repair Cafe. It's a one-time fee. And it gives you the toolkit, which a lot of people really rely on who don't have a network like this. But if that's just prohibitive to you, you can follow a different model. It doesn't have to be an official repair cafe, and then you wouldn't have to join. And then snacks. So the big items we'll talk about next are the lamp parts kit, reusable or weatherproof signs and banner, and snacks and or lunch. Okay, so those are the biggest costs. How can you cut those? Weatherproof signage. I mean, it would cost you $200 to buy a nice banner that you would make sure it's reusable. It doesn't have dates like, April 4th, you just want to say this Saturday or just no date at all. But you can also, and then the lawn signs, banners. But I also know a lot of groups that have collected signs after an election is over, not in a contentious way that's going to, because we've had a lot of people, you don't want to steal signs. But when they're all done, you can paint them over with white and you can have a day where your volunteers get together and make those foam core signs and put them in the lawn so you can see them, same with arrows for parking or for your cafe and a banner. You could do it on a sheet if you wanted to. I mean, you could do handmade stuff. I've seen beautiful A-frames, that kind of stuff, and painted. It's all either your time or money if you have it. So that's one way to use time instead of money. The lamp parts kit, we estimate 150 is a real bare bones place fee for putting together a lamp parts kit. And what that is you're ready to fix any lamp that comes in the door with the exclusion of a real rare antique one. And so you need to have, I'm not an electrician, but the sockets in multiple, a three-way versus a two-way versus a one, and also cords and plugs in all the colors and all those sort of basic things that are in that kit. And so the other ways around that, if you can't build it to begin with, borrow one from an existing cafe if you can find one, or a fixer that has one. We usually have a fixer who has one, and we'll make sure there's a fixer who is experienced and has one when we start a new cafe until they can fund their own. Charge for parts at cost so that you can reimburse right then and there, for it, and so that you put out the money, but then you get it right back. Three, if you can work it on a Saturday, typically not a Sunday, but if you're close to a hardware store, you can send the guest to the hardware store to purchase it and come back and get it fixed that day. That's another way if you can work that out if it's close. And then, of course, the third biggest expense is snacks and lunch for the volunteers. There's also at a cafe, very typically a small coffee, tea, and maybe a baked good or an apple or something very simple for the guests. It makes it a little more pleasant for them to wait. But really, you have to feed your volunteers. They're there for 4 or 5 hours. You need to feed them. But you can cook. And I've been to places where they had really nice chili, and two versions. One was vegetarian, one wasn't. And they had cornbread and maybe gluten-free corn. And they just took care of everyone. And it didn't have to cost. But again, it's your time. So that's the crunch. Okay, you can go. All press is good press, but free is the best. So, social media, Facebook and Instagram are fabulous. For our demographic here, Facebook is where it's at. Reddit is great. You can find, we have the zip code groups and so you can do it by your town or by your area. You can do it by interest group in those towns sometimes. But Reddit, you can also find interest groups locally. So then and also ask your volunteers to share it on their own personal social media. So then you're reaching people that aren't on those groups necessarily, but know your people. Local press, if you have it, is fabulous. You contact the papers, you get an article. They always say to pitch an art, take a picture of your fixers, maybe invite the mayor and get it like a little promo in the paper. But also listings and calendars, right? If you get it into their calendar or event listing, patch.com is all over the place. Next door, you can post things as an event, and other local event sites that you can find. And then again, the third thing is if you have a town newsletter or e-blast, again, get into your town, have the mayor put it in theirs, or all those sort of blasts about what's going on environmentally. That's another really nice, easy way to get the word out. And then word of mouth, go locally. If you want to print flyers, putting them out in bulletin boards, post offices, libraries. Partner with a local civic group or club and then go speak there. And you sort of get people interested either in fixing or just coming. A very common is Rotary Club here and Lions clubs and those kinds of groups, or men's fixing clubs or women's sewing clubs, all those kinds of things. And having a flyer or just even one simple to take or to photograph or a QR code, it depends on the people's savvy, at the venue when you have your cafe to announce the next one so that they know about it. And also getting email addresses if you can, so you can put them on your email list. Okay. And that's it. There's, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank that. Other ways to fund. Thank you. Ask a store for a gift card, like either a Home Depot or your local hardware store. Instead of saying, "Hey, can you give us tools? Can you give us all this stuff?" Go in and say, "Hey, can this is a little bit of the foot in the door technique. Can you give us a $50 gift card, which we will then spend at your store?" And so it's a smaller way to ask, and then you get the stuff and you get the discount or it's getting. And if you go to every Home Depot, Lowe's, Dick's is something we have here, hardware, local, if you get a little bit at each one, that's a way to piece together things like extra tools if you need, or of course the lamp parts kit. Offer sponsorship opportunities. If the pizza place gives you a donation or a discount, they're a sponsor. And then you put them on all your emails that you send out and your posters at the, just thank them. And a lot of times that means a lot to someone locally. And so that can be a way to really get more from people or get something from people and let them feel good about it. Making sure you're collecting donations, visible, very clearly marked, easy to see donation jars throughout the cafe to collect donations if your town allows. Sometimes we've had issues, but it's usually when they're funded by the town that they don't allow that. So hopefully that won't be a problem. Seek small grants. This one is tricky because some grants require you to be a nonprofit, and a lot of new cafes are not officially nonprofits. Most cafes are not nonprofits. And so then you have to pay attention and seek grants that are open to small groups and individuals rather than just nonprofits. But they do exist. I have seen some. Okay, next. So that's it. Ready to start finding a free volunteer. And this is, I'm just going to add this, that doesn't require extra event insurance. It's very important to me, very important because the insurance can be absolutely deal breaker if you have to pay for that yourself. So finding a nice nonprofit organization that has insurance isn't okay with you having the event there. Pound the pavement for discounts, donations, sponsorships. Use social media over flyers to save money on paper. If you choose, you can do paperless. Take good care of your venue, your volunteers, and your guests so you can do it again. And take great pictures because they're priceless for promotion the next time. That's it.
Sorry, my buttons are all in the wrong place because I'm sharing. Thank you. That was a speed round. I'm also going to go quickly and hopefully we'll have more time for questions and comments. I was tip tapping away while Susie was chatting. I hope that she will chime in while I'm chatting too. And yeah, feel free to drop questions in the chat as they come up. So I'm here to talk about traditional avenues of fundraising. I am the chair of the Tool Library Alliance nationally. I worked for my local tool library, raising about $500,000 a year, and I'm a professional fundraiser by trade. There are a lot of ways that people think about fundraising. Most of the organizations that I have worked with that are tiny to small to mid-size, this is sort of the general breakdown. Most of the funding comes from grants. A certain percentage, especially if you are operating a membership structure, which a lot of libraries and things do, comes from fees. So memberships, registrations for workshops, things like that, and from individual donations. Ideally, you have a lot of people who are each giving a little bit of money rather than like 3 or 4 really wealthy people who are each giving you a lot of money, because if one of those people changes their giving pattern or whatever, it is a really devastating to your budget. And so we call that an upside down pyramid. You want your donor pyramid to have most of the people on the bottom giving a small amount and just a few people who are giving a large amount, if at all. Our tool library in Baltimore has only like 2 or 3 people who give more than $1,000 a year. And that's for a $500,000 budget. Corporate sponsorships, for most people, do not make up a huge amount of their budget. This is something there's a lot of interest in soliciting corporate sponsorships, and I'll give some tips for that. realistically, it is a lot of work to develop that relationship. And it tends to be very transactional. And so it's hard to keep it going year after year most of the time. And it often does not yield as much funding as people think it should, given how much money these corporations have. But the point of them is to make and keep money, not to give it away, generally. A lot of people see success with events, fundraising events. This could be small, like Dine Out to Donate, where a restaurant donates a portion of the funds. It could be a party in your space, bingo night, things like that. And then retail sales. So that's either a lot of libraries of things will sell excess inventory or do yard sales. Folks sell t-shirts, stickers, buttons, things like that. So those typically make up a little bit of a smaller portion of most budgets. If you are interested, clearly I cannot go over everything about fundraising tonight, but I want to point you to some resources. And the best place to start is at the Tool Library Alliance website, where you can find all of these things launched or linked. The Library of Things Toolkit is one of the best places you can go. This applies for all kinds of organizations, not just libraries of things. There are sections for funds generation, and actually Toolkit 2.0 launched today, and it has even more. And so you can find things about organizational budgeting, how to structure membership fees, how to structure workshops and classes and charge for them, crowdfunding, grants, digital fundraising, all kinds of stuff in there. And I wrote some of them, and others wrote others. It's a really, really great resource. It's linked from our website, and it's free. Also at our website, you can find the public resource drive. So to libraryalliance.org, if you scroll down to resources, you'll see this public resource drive. This includes templates for fundraising appeals, example grants, a grant readiness worksheet that helps you think through like all of the steps that you need to, or the questions you need to answer before you even apply for a grant. It is really, really useful. Also linked there is Reuse Funders, which is a living document of grant prospects, not owned by us, but I think really useful. And then you can also find information about collabs and network meetings. Both of these are open to absolutely anyone, anywhere in the world, from any kind of organization or just interested, whatever. Collabs are more structured learning like this, and then network meetings are roundtables. We are going to have a collab about corporate sponsorships coming up because we had a lot of requests for it. So keep an eye there. You can sign up for our emails. We are going to be sending that sign up link around too. So my best tips, this is like, if I have 2 slides to teach you about fundraising for asking people for money, the number one thing that I hear in trying to prepare volunteers to ask for money is they're like, ooh, that feels icky. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. I'm afraid to ask for money. And I just ask them, remember the last time you gave to something that you care about? How did you feel? Not afraid or icky or grossed out, right? Like when you support something that you love, it makes you feel great. And there's actually psychological research that people feel wealthier in direct proportion to how much money they give away. So giving money is really good for our brains. It's really good for our social connections. And so if you think of it not as a request to take something away from someone, but as an invitation to feel good, that is how you fundraise. And the number one reason that people give when you survey them and you ask about why they donated, the number one answer is, well, somebody asked me. So people do not give if you don't ask, for the most part. And they will give if you do ask. And the worst that someone can say is no. I will say one of my best tips is to ask for a specific amount and to frame it as, would you consider donating $25? That is such an easy way to put it in an email or even in a conversation. Would you consider sponsoring this event at $10,000? Is that something that you could do? Right? Because that is not asking them to do it. It's asking them to think about it. And that's a really important reframing for that relationship. And also when you are asking, especially if you're like writing a mass email or you're doing something that's a little more formal, if you keep in mind that the most successful language is talking about what that donor is going to do through donating, not when you give money to my organization will XYZ. If you say, when you give to the Repair Cafe, you make it possible to keep things out of the landfill. You make it possible for people to hang on to their family heirlooms. You are the hero of this story. That is the most successful fundraising language. And like Susie said, you got to take care of your people. Don't forget to thank people. And there are samples and templates and guides for stewardship in the resources I just shared. And yeah, make a plan in advance about how you're going to ask people before you start asking, because it's really easy to let it fall by the wayside. And then don't forget to ask them again. People who have given to you before are the most likely to give to you again. Asking companies for money is a little bit different, but also keep in mind the people that you're asking are people. And so you also have to treat them like donors. I will say most corporate sponsors, whether you're asking them for a crate of bananas or $5,000, you have to ask them way further in advance than you think. A lot of corporate budgets get set once a year and they spend it and then it's gone. And so the earlier you can ask people, the better, because the worst they could say is, "Oh, we're out of money for this year, but you have time. Ask us again in July when our budget reopens." Nobody's ever going to say like, "Oh, it's too early for us to think about that." It's not, believe me. And most of them require at least 2 months to consider your request. A lot of people think like, "Oh, I'll drop off a letter. I'll send a letter to all the small businesses," or like, "I'll pound the pavement and I'll just drop off letters." And that doesn't work super well. There are companies like Walmart, each store manager has $1,000 a month that they can give away in store credit. I don't love Walmart, but I'll take their money. And so you do get lucky sometimes, but the best way that you can find corporate sponsors is through people who work there. And so if you look in your email database for people who have an email ending in that URL, you might find that you have a volunteer or a member or someone who's visited you who works there, and you can reach out. You can use LinkedIn. You can just pull your volunteer core, like, "Hey, who works for a company that might be willing to put me in touch and see if they want to put their logo on this thing?" That is always going to work better. And if you are soliciting somebody who produces or sells anything that could be useful to you, ask them for that product instead. It's going to be way easier for them to give it to you than to give you cash. And that also counts for services. Services are not tax deductible. So you can give them a tax deduction if you're a 501c3. You can give them a tax letter for products, but not for services, unfortunately. And make the benefits clear up front. So decide in advance what you are willing to do, what kinds of things you are willing to put a sponsor's name or logo on. It will help you make the ask, and it will also help you not get caught in an awkward position where someone's like, "I thought our name was going to be on this." And you're like, "No, it's a library. I can't name it after you," or whatever. So just decide upfront what you can offer them, make it clear, and then also quantify the size of your audience. So go into your email client, your social media channels, whatever, see how many people are signed up for your emails or opening them or looking at your posts, and say, you're going to reach 5,000 people in our area who are interested in these values. This is good for you. Don't forget, "Would you consider?" Very powerful phrase. And again, don't forget to say thank you, not only to the company, but also to the people who made introductions for you, so that they can help you next time also. That's it from me. Go ahead, Emily. I'm going to catch up with the chat.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Barker. I'm the Executive Director for Reuse Minnesota, and I'm based in the Twin Cities area. I am going to talk about contracting with governments, and you can skip this slide. This is more for just if people want to come back to who we are. So Reuse Minnesota is a member-based organization, but we work with a lot of different entities, primarily governments, that offer fix-it clinics here in Minnesota and other reuse events. It's actually kind of interesting to learn more from my colleagues in other states because Minnesota is very heavy on government-led programming related to reuse. We definitely have nonprofits, like you heard from the Tool Library to start off the day today, but we have a lot of governments at county level in particular that are involved with this. And when it comes to these types of events, many of them host their own, but some of them will also consider contracting out that service or that work for a few different reasons. Sometimes it's staffing and it's easier for them to hire a contractor that can deal with adding, their own people and paying people. Sometimes it's a legal concern. For some reason, liability that they're willing to fund it, but they don't want to be responsible for the actual, any liability type stuff. So they'll have requirements for insurance. Or the other truth is public buy-in. I worked in government for a long time before this, and the frank truth is that sometimes a lot of people just don't trust the government. And so when when you have something like this, even if it's a fix-it clinic, that can be a challenging barrier for some folks. So if you have a trusted nonprofit that's in the community, that can be a way to help create that public buy-in as needed. In Minnesota, we have a few different examples, fix-it clinics and swap events. So Carver County and Dakota County are both Twin Cities metro area counties. One of them, Carver County, has worked, they work, their setup is that they have a nonprofit called A Better Society that they just give the money to, and it's A Better Society hosts. They have a permanent physical location where all the fix-it clinics are happening, and they just provide the funding for it. Dakota County has a little bit more of an integrated relationship, but the entity and we were actually a past contractor for them. They now have an individual contractor they work with, but they share the responsibilities where the contractor is doing volunteers primarily and management of the equipment. For swaps, my organization actually has a contract with Hennepin County right now. They have a grant that's funded through the state of Minnesota to put on swap events. And then we are a subcontractor to manage certain aspects, volunteers and things like that for the events. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, on the next couple of slides, some of the things you want to think about if you want to approach this. Next slide.
Oops. Sorry.
No worries. So
too interactive.
So a few things I just want to highlight if you're going to go down this approach is there are some contract necessities, and the biggest one is clarity of roles. And this is, I'm talking about this both from the side of having worked in government and having been on the contractor side. The really important pieces are clarity of roles around who is purchasing, storing, and managing your supplies. There might be where maybe the government entity is purchasing, but then you're managing everything in terms of storage and bringing it to the events, or some combination of that. Volunteers, so who's recruiting that? Who's responsible for getting volunteer waivers? Is that on your government entity? Are you responsible for that? The scheduling for volunteers. Are your venues coordinated by the government entity? Are you responsible for that? And if it's a paid venue, who's taking care of those costs? And the promotion side is really important too. Usually, you're both going to want to be responsible for sharing the promotion those promotion tasks, because that benefits both the government entity and your organization. But things like who's going to design that? Who's going to? Some government entities, retract that. The vast majority of government entities are very particular about their branding. And so if it is their swap event or their fix-it clinic, they're going to want to have things that match theirs. And I don't blame them for that, but they often will want to do that. But then the expectation would be that you would share the responsibility for promotion on social media or things like that. And printing, who's going to be responsible for those things. So these are all things, and I'd be happy to share if anyone ever wants to look at this. We have a contract from both of our contracts we've done for fix-it clinics and swaps, and I'd be happy to share those things. On the budgeting side, if you do have, if you want to approach a government entity and say, hey, you've got these reuse goals, you want to put these on, and we'd like to submit a proposal, or maybe there will be a government entity that puts out a call for proposals. Some things to submit, and this is partially lessons learned. Things don't forget when you submit your budget. One is travel time, so don't just count the time you're going to be at the clinic itself. Make sure you pay yourself to get there. Sometimes, depending on the region that you're covered, some of these counties, if you were on the session where Ben from Hennepin County was talking last time, it's a 44-city county. It's gigantic. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself that. Record keeping and reporting time. So if you have a contract with a county, it is very likely you're going to be asked to collect data because a lot of government entities want to be able to track the weight of materials that were swapped or fixed, because they will get, at least like in a state like Minnesota, they'll get credit for that from a waste prevention perspective. So you want to make sure you have time for that and the time for writing up reports or invoicing, things like that. Mileage, for sure. Make sure you pay yourself for actually driving places. And storage and facility costs. So if that's relevant, if you are either going to be, if you have an office, one of the things that's nice about doing a contract versus a grant, a lot of times is you can bill for things that maybe a government grant won't allow you to bill for, like your space, your rent, or your electricity, or the phone costs. You can bill for some of those things, or you can factor it into your hourly rate. So think about those pieces when you're building your budget for sure. I wanted to keep mine really short and sweet because I know it's not as common of one, but I know we only have technically a minute left. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy. We can all come on and answer those now. So.
I know folks have put some good questions in the chat as well, and I appreciate that. I do have to facilitate another session, so I'm going to have to hop off, but please feel free to stay.
Yeah. Sounds
And if
good.
you have questions for me, my email is you can reach me at hello@toollibraryalliance.org. It comes to my email.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah. I do want to say that we have two of our Minnesota fixers here on the chat, so it's fun to see them.
Yeah, and you can always email me. I drop mine in there too. I have a lot of experience just with the cafes, but that's sort of that's the budget stuff that I have, but I'm happy to answer questions. And every town is different, and every area is different, and every, store is different. We know that. Is there a guide for answering reps or oh, I don't know. I don't know that. Or
I don't know if there's a guide, but Sharon, if you ever have it come up, you're welcome to reach out to me because especially having worked in government, I feel like I have a pretty good sense for what a lot of them are looking for. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And um, yeah, one thing to think about, there are often a lot of government entities, depending on where you are, will be looking at like equity and access. You want to be able to speak to those types of things, as Susie was mentioning, like busing and parking and all of those pieces. So you want to make sure that you have that. The one thing I'll mention that came up for us as a government or a contractor is we were required to carry insurance. So I know Susie mentioned that if you're going to contract for government,
hmm,
expect that you are going to need insurance. So that's the only challenge of if you're an individual, sometimes that can get a little tricky. I know when we work with Dakota County, even as a nonprofit, we don't own vehicles, but we had to make sure that our general liability had like a vehicle line. So then if while we were transporting equipment or going to and from, that we had that like a piece. So that is one thing and factor that in. We justified that in what we were billing the county for our rate. We said, well, our liability insurance is going to go up this much a year in order to have a plan big enough to cover what you want us to have. It was like $2 million policy. And so we charged for that and that was fine. Um, but yeah, if you're in New York City, you probably don't need to worry about parking. But for many of us,
you need to drop off. You need drop off areas. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be some people driving, and that's I know not everyone, but yes, you still need then you need volunteers to watch the stuff while it gets dropped. I mean, it's just everything has its own, difficulties. So.
any other questions? Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. I know Leanna had to head out, but we really appreciate you joining us for this session. This one was kind of one of those ones where like there was a few different topics and it just made sense. So I know this was a short and sweet one, but I hope you learned something and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
See you in the next session.